I'm Grace, 38, female, and when my husband of 10 years packed a suitcase and told me he was moving out, he expected me to fall apart. He was wrong. The silence in our house after the front door slammed was different. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning or the comfortable hush of two people reading in the same room. It was a hollow, echoing void, the sound of a foundation cracking. Leo was gone. He had walked out with a single suitcase, a smirk on his face, and the parting words, "I'm moving out tonight. Don't try to stop me." I didn't. I just stood in the living room, the room I had designed with its cool grays and warm woods, and I listened to the sound of his impractical sports car roaring to life and then fading down the street. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange, glacial calm washed over me, freezing the panic before it could even begin. In that moment, with the scent of his cologne still hanging in the air, I realized that this ending had been writing itself for a very long time. I just hadn't been reading the words. I am an architect. My life is built on plans, on blueprints, on the idea that with careful thought and a strong foundation, you can create something beautiful and lasting. I had applied the same principle to my marriage, 10 years with Leo. We had built a life that from the outside and for a long time from the inside looked like a perfect structure. A beautiful home in a quiet suburb, two stable careers, a shared future that seemed as solid as concrete. I loved that life. I thought he did too. But over the last couple of years, I'd started noticing hairline fractures in our foundation. Little signs of stress that I had dutifully and foolishly patched over, telling myself all structures settle over time. The first major crack appeared about a year ago. It was the spontaneous trip. Leo, whose job as a marketing manager was becoming increasingly focused on social media and experiences, came home one Tuesday, eyes blazing with an artificial excitement. He'd found a last-minute, all-inclusive, and entirely non-refundable deal for a week in Ibiza. He wanted us to leave that Friday. I had a final presentation for a major client that Friday, the culmination of 6 months of work. It was a project that could define my year. "Leo, I can't," I explained as gently as I could. "This is the Henderson Building. I've told you how important it is. We can go anywhere you want next month." His face fell, the manufactured joy curdling into petulant disappointment. "See, this is what I'm talking about, Grace," he'd said, pacing the kitchen. "Your life is all blueprints and deadlines. You're chained to your desk. We never do anything fun anymore, anything spontaneous." It didn't matter that we had just returned from a meticulously planned trip to Oregon's coast 2 months prior. That didn't count because it was planned. It wasn't spontaneous. He accused me of being boring. In the end, he went to Ibiza with his friend Mark, who had recently gone through a messy divorce and was rediscovering his youth. I saw the photos on social media. Boat parties, nightclubs, Leo posing with people half his age. He looked happy, but it was a brittle, performative kind of happiness. I told myself he was just blowing off steam. Then came the issue with the car. Our shared sedan, a perfectly reliable and comfortable car, was suddenly a symbol of our suburban prison. He wanted to trade it in for a 2-seater sports car that cost a fortune and had trunk space barely big enough for a grocery bag. "Imagine us in this, Gracie," he'd said, showing me a picture on his phone. "Just cruising, no plans, just the open road." I, the practical architect, ran the numbers. I pointed out the insurance costs, the terrible gas mileage, the fact that we couldn't even pick up my parents from the airport in it. We argued for a week. He sulked, accusing me of crushing his soul and not understanding his need for a little bit of excitement. We compromised on a sportier, but still practical, sedan. He treated it as a massive defeat. He rarely drove it, preferring to take ride shares to his downtown office. The car sat in the garage, a monument to my supposed lack of adventure. The most telling sign, the one I feel the most foolish for ignoring, was the phone. Over the last 6 months, his phone had become a third hand, an essential organ. He would sit on the couch next to me, scrolling and smiling at things I couldn't see. He'd de-angle the screen away instinctively whenever I walked by. The constant texting, which he brushed off as work, stretched late into the night. He was always talking about brand collaborations and influencer outreach. a part of his job that suddenly seemed to consume his every waking moment. "Who are you always talking to?" I asked one night, trying to sound casual. He looked up, his expression guarded. "It's just work, Grace. It's this new campaign with some lifestyle influencers." "You wouldn't get it." He made me feel like I was the one being intrusive, the one who was paranoid. He made me feel old. Now, standing in the deafening silence of my living room, these memories were no longer isolated incidents. They were chapters in a story of a man desperate to escape the life he had helped build. He hadn't just walked out on our marriage. He had walked out on our shared history, on our agreements, on me. And he had done it with a smirk, fully expecting me to be the weeping mess that would eventually beg him to come back. He thought he was starting a new, exciting chapter. He had no idea I was about to start one of my own. The week leading up to his departure was thick with a tension you could almost see, like heat haze shimmering off asphalt. We moved around each other with a forced, brittle politeness. Every question, no matter how mundane, "Did you pick up the dry cleaning? What do you want for dinner?" was loaded with unspoken grievances. We were like two strangers sharing a house, communicating in a code of civility that barely masked the hostility underneath. Leo was more distant than ever, his mind clearly elsewhere. He would come home late, smelling of expensive cocktails and a cologne he'd never worn before. He'd claim he was at networking events, but his eyes held a feverish, guilty energy. He was living a life parallel to ours, and the space between those two lives was stretching to a breaking point. The break came on a Wednesday night. Our 10th anniversary was a month away, and I, ever the planner, thought maybe we could use a trip to reconnect. Maybe if I bent a little, if I showed him I could be spontaneous too, we could fix things. "I was thinking," I began, as we were clearing the dinner plates, "what if we finally took that trip to the Italian countryside for our anniversary? We could rent a villa, take cooking classes, visit those little towns we always see in movies. Just us." It was a dream we had talked about since we were first married, a symbol of the quiet, romantic future we were supposed to share. Leo didn't even look at me. He scoffed, a short, sharp sound of derision that felt like a slap. "A villa in Italy? Seriously, Grace, that's a trip for old people. I can't think of anything more boring." The word stung. Boring. It was his new favorite weapon against me. "It's what we always said we wanted," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "Well, maybe I don't want that anymore," he shot back, finally turning to face me. His eyes were cold. "Maybe I want something vibrant, something with energy, something unpredictable." He pulled out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. "Mark and I were talking about this huge music festival in Spain. It's supposed to be epic. Now that is a trip." I looked at him, at his face illuminated by the phone's glow, and I felt a profound sense of dislocation. It was like I didn't know this man at all. The Leo I married loved quiet nights and long walks. This new Leo seemed to crave noise, crowds, and constant validation. "A music festival?" I said, unable to keep the disbelief out of my voice. "For our 10th anniversary, you want to go to a music festival with your single friend." "Why not?" he challenged, his voice rising. "Because it's not in your 5-year plan? Because you can't schedule fun on a spreadsheet?" The argument devolved from there, a downward spiral of accusations and resentments that had been simmering for months. He said he felt trapped in our perfect, boring house. He said he felt like he was suffocating in our predictable life. He said he needed to live his life, not just plan it. Every word was designed to hurt, to paint me as the architect of his unhappiness, the warden of his suburban jail. I stood there and took it, my own anger a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I refused to yell back. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a screaming match. My silence seemed to infuriate him more than any retort could have. "I can't do this anymore, Grace," he finally declared, throwing his hands up in a gesture of dramatic surrender. "I just can't." He stormed out of the kitchen and went upstairs. I heard dresser drawers being yanked open, the closet door sliding with a violent rumble. I didn't follow him. I just stood there, my hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, listening to the sounds of him erasing himself from our room. A few minutes later, he came down the stairs, pulling a small suitcase behind him. He was wearing a new leather jacket I'd never seen before. He must have bought it for his new life. He stopped in the entryway, positioning himself in the middle of the floor like an actor hitting his mark. He took a deep breath, composing his face into a mask of tragic resolve. This was it, the big scene. "I'm moving out tonight," he said, his voice dripping with rehearsed gravity. He paused, making sure I was looking at him, making sure I understood the weight of his declaration. Then he delivered the line he thought would break me. "Don't try to stop me." He waited. His expression was a complex mixture of arrogance and anticipation. He expected tears. He expected pleading. He expected me to run to him, to cling to his arm and beg him to stay, to promise I would change, that I would be more fun, more spontaneous, less me. He was waiting for the drama. He needed it. It was the only thing that could validate his decision, that could turn his selfish betrayal into a tragic, necessary act of self-discovery. He was waiting for his cue. And I refused to give it to him. As Leo stood there in the entryway, bathed in the soft glow of the porch light filtering through the door's glass panels, the world seemed to slow down. The frantic, pounding panic I should have felt was completely absent. In its place was a profound and unsettling stillness, the kind of quiet that follows a lightning strike just before you hear the thunder. I wasn't seeing my husband of 10 years. I was seeing a stranger performing a role in a play he had written for himself. The leather jacket, the dramatic pronouncement, the defiant tilt of his chin, it was all a costume, a script. And in that frozen moment, I saw my own role in his play, the weeping, hysterical wife, the anchor holding him back, the boring, stable woman he had to escape to find his true self. And I simply refused to play the part. My mind, usually a busy hive of plans and contingencies, went completely blank and then rebooted with a single, clear thought. Of course. Of course this was happening. It was the logical conclusion of the Ibiza trip, the sports car, the secret smiles at his phone. It was the final, predictable step in the story he was telling himself. All the little red flags I had ignored, all the strange behaviors I had explained away, now snapped into a perfectly clear, horrifying picture. It wasn't about a rut or boredom. It was about betrayal. He hadn't just fallen out of love with me. He had actively built a new life in his mind, and he was leaving to see if it was real. The silence stretched on. 1 second, 2, 5. I could see the confidence in his eyes begin to waver. His smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. This wasn't going according to his script. I was supposed to be a puddle on the floor by now. "Aren't you going to say anything?" he finally asked, a hint of irritation in his voice. He needed my reaction. My pain was the fuel for his grand departure. I took a slow breath, the glacial calm inside me solidifying into something hard and strong. I looked at him, not as my husband, but as a business partner who had just announced he was dissolving our firm in the most damaging way possible. "Okay, Leo," I said. My voice was even, devoid of any emotion I was supposed to be feeling. It sounded foreign even to me. "If that's what you need to do." That was it, no questions, no accusations, no begging, just a simple, devastating acceptance. The look on his face was something I will never forget. It was as if I had slapped him. The confusion morphed into disbelief, then into a flash of pure rage. I had robbed him of his big moment. I had denied him his dramatic exit. By not fighting, not crying, not falling apart, I had cheapened his grand gesture, reducing it to what it was: a selfish, childish tantrum. "Okay," he repeated, his voice cracking. "Okay, that's all you have to say, after 10 years. "You've clearly made your decision," I replied, my calm unwavering. "You told me not to stop you, so I won't." He stared at me for another long moment, searching my face for any sign of a crack in my composure. He found none. He was a boat that had cut its own anchor line, expecting a storm, only to find the sea perfectly, unnervingly still. He seemed adrift, lost. With a final, frustrated huff, he turned, yanked the door open, and slammed it behind him with a force that rattled the pictures on the wall. The sound was violent, final, an exclamation point at the end of a chapter. I stood there, alone in the house, listening to the silence that rushed back in. But this time, it wasn't a void. It felt different. It felt like space. My space. The betrayal was a deep, cold wound, but what hurt even more was the performance. The calculated cruelty of it. The fact that he had wanted to see me break. He thought he had taken all the power in the room with him when he left. He was wrong. In my silence, in my refusal to play his game, I had found my own. The shock was wearing off, and something else was taking its place. Something that felt dangerously like resolve. The echo of the slamming door faded, leaving a silence that felt heavy and absolute. For a minute, I didn't move. I expected the tears to come, a tsunami of grief to finally break through the dam of my composure. But they didn't. Instead, the architect in my brain, the part of me that sees a problem and immediately starts formulating a plan to... Okay, over. My house had been breached. My life had been compromised. The first step was to secure the structure. My hands were perfectly steady as I picked up my phone. I didn't scroll through old photos of us or call my mother for a tearful confession. My first call was to my sister, Emily. She was a lawyer, pragmatic, and fiercely protective. "Grace, it's late. Is everything okay?" she answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Leo left me," I said, the words sounding blunt and factual, like reporting a structural failure. There was a pause then. "I'm on my way." "No, don't," I said quickly. "Not yet. I don't need comfort right now. I need a name. The name of the best, most ruthless divorce lawyer you know." Emily didn't ask questions. She understood. She gave me a name and a number, and I promised to call her back later. My second call was to that lawyer's office. I left a calm, clear voicemail requesting an emergency consultation for the following morning. Step 1, legal counsel engaged. Next, I walked to my office and opened my laptop. The screen illuminated my face in the darkroom. I navigated to our joint bank account. My breath hitched when I saw the recent activity. A $2,000 cash withdrawal from an ATM near Leo's office made that afternoon. He had been planning this. He had taken his escape fund before he even packed his bag. Then I saw the charges from the past few weeks. Expensive dinners at flashy downtown restaurants, tabs at cocktail bars I'd never heard of, a charge from a high-end men's clothing store. He had been funding his new life with our shared money. A cold anger, clean and sharp, cut through me. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a theft. I found the account I had opened before we were married, the one I had kept with my own savings, my just-in-case fund that I never thought I'd need. I meticulously calculated what was legally and ethically mine, my last 2 paychecks, half of our joint savings, an amount to cover the mortgage and bills. With a series of clicks, I transferred the funds. The balance in our joint account dropped precipitously. Step 2, assets secured. Then I opened the banking app for our primary credit card. It was my account, he was just an authorized user. I scrolled through the options until I found the one I was looking for. Report a card as lost or stolen. I selected his card. A pop-up asked for confirmation. This action is irreversible and a new card will be issued to the primary cardholder. I pressed confirm without a moment's hesitation. Step 3, credit lines severed. My final call of the night was to a 24-hour locksmith. "Yes, I need a non-emergency rekeying service, please, as soon as possible." An hour later, a man in a jumpsuit was standing on my porch. He was polite and professional, never asking why a woman would be changing her locks at 11 o'clock at night. I stood in the kitchen, sipping a glass of water, and listened to the sound of the drill. The whirring noise was strangely therapeutic, the sound of the old tumblers being removed, the old keys being rendered obsolete. When he was done, he handed me a set of shiny, new keys. They felt solid and real in my hand. They were keys to my house. Step 4, perimeter secured. After the locksmith left, I walked through the quiet house. It already felt different. It felt lighter. I went into my bedroom. His clothes were still in the closet, his things were still on the nightstand. But instead of feeling heartbroken, I felt a surge of energy. I didn't sleep. I cleaned. I stripped the bed and put on fresh linens that smelled of lavender. I went through the closet, pulling out all of his clothes, his shoes, his jackets, and piling them neatly in the guest room. I cleared his things from the bathroom, wiping down the counter until it gleamed. It wasn't a frantic, grief-fueled purge. It was a methodical, quiet reclamation of space. With every shirt I folded, with every stray sock I put aside, I was reinforcing the new reality. He didn't live here anymore. By the time the first rays of dawn painted the sky, the house was spotless. I sat on my couch in my clean, quiet, secure home and watched the sunrise. I still hadn't cried. I felt hollowed out but not empty. I felt like a building that had survived an earthquake. Damaged, yes, shaken to my very core, but still standing. The next morning, I dressed in one of my sharpest suits. It was my armor. I felt a strange sense of purpose as I drove to the lawyer's office, my new house key feeling solid and reassuring in my hand. The lawyer, a woman named Ms. Albright, was exactly what I needed. She was sharp, no nonsense, and radiated a powerful competence. I laid out the events of the last 12 hours calmly and factually. I told her about the cash withdrawal, the separate account I'd moved money into, the canceled credit card, and the changed locks. Ms. Albright listened without interruption, a pen poised over a legal pad. When I was finished, she looked at me over the top of her glasses, and a small, approving smile touched her lips. "Well, Grace," she said, "most clients come to me in a state of shock and grief. You've come with a battle plan already in motion. Good for you. You've done everything right to protect yourself." Her validation was like a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still bleeding. We spent the next hour going over the initial steps of filing for divorce. I left her office feeling empowered, armed with legal strategy and a clear path forward. The first volley from Leo came just as I was getting back into my car. My phone buzzed. It was a text from him. "Leo, my card was just declined at a coffee shop. What did you do? This is embarrassing." I looked at the message, a bubble of something that felt like bitter laughter rising in my chest. Embarrassing, that's what he was concerned about. Not the fact that our marriage was over, but his public image. I didn't reply. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Leo. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. "Leo, pick up your phone. I'm locked out of the house. Did you seriously change the locks? Are you insane?" I could feel his anger vibrating through the screen. His plan was falling apart. The world was not bending to his will. His adoring, heartbroken wife was not waiting by the door with open arms. Instead, the locks had been changed. The audacity of it clearly baffled him. I remembered Ms. Albright's advice. Keep all communication minimal and direct. Let him know all future contact goes through me. I typed out a calm, concise reply, every word chosen with care. "Me, Leo, given your decision to permanently move out last night, I have taken steps to secure our shared home and our finances. All further communication needs to go through my lawyer. I will have her office forward you her contact information." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response was almost instantaneous. My phone began to buzz incessantly with calls from him. I silenced it. The voicemails started piling up. I listened to the first one out of a morbid curiosity. "Grace, what is wrong with you?" His voice was no longer cold and arrogant, but high-pitched with fury and disbelief. "A lawyer? You called a lawyer? We had a fight. People have fights. You don't call a lawyer and change the locks. This is insane. You are being cruel and vindictive, and you are going to regret this." I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. A few minutes later, a text from a number I didn't recognize popped up. "Unknown, this is Mark. Leo is with me. What you're doing is crazy. You need to let him come home and talk this out. Don't be like this." I blocked the number without a second thought. Leo was trying to deploy his allies to frame me as the unhinged, hysterical woman. He was trying to wrestle the narrative back in his favor. It was pathetic. I spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-focused productivity. I went to my office and lost myself in my blueprints, the clean lines and precise angles a soothing balm for my chaotic personal life. I informed my boss that I would be taking a few personal days, and he was nothing but supportive. That evening, I ate a simple dinner alone, the silence of the house no longer feeling threatening, but peaceful. Leo had expected to orchestrate a dramatic saga of heartbreak and reconciliation. Instead, I had met his drama with logistics. I had met his emotional chaos with calm, decisive action. He had wanted a war of hearts. I was giving him a battle of paperwork. And it was a battle he was completely unprepared to fight. 3 days passed. 3 days of near-total silence from Leo's side of the chasm that had opened between us. After his initial barrage of angry calls and texts, he had gone quiet. I learned through the grapevine, a text from a mutual friend asking if I was okay, that he was staying on Mark's couch. The same friend also mentioned, with a touch of gossip-fueled sympathy, that the young influencer Leo had been chasing had gotten spooked by all the drama. Apparently, a 35-year-old man in the middle of a messy marital collapse wasn't part of her vibrant, carefree brand. The news didn't bring me joy or even a sense of vindictive satisfaction. It just felt inevitable. Leo's fantasy was built on a flimsy foundation of ego and daydreams. It couldn't withstand the first brush with reality. The exciting, spontaneous life he had imagined was, in practice, sleeping on a friend's sofa, cut off from his comfortable cash flow, with a woman who was more interested in his professional connections than his personal baggage. During those 3 days, I continued my work of reclaiming my life. I had a long, tearful, but ultimately healing conversation with my sister. I met with a financial advisor. I boxed up the last of Leo's things from the bedroom and moved them into the guest room, which I now mentally referred to as the staging area. The master bedroom was mine again. The scent of his cologne was finally gone, replaced by the lavender scent of my own laundry detergent. I started to feel the grief then, but it was a different kind than I had expected. It wasn't a grief for the man who had walked out the door. It was a grief for the 10 years I had invested, for the future I had so carefully designed, for the man I thought Leo was. It was a quiet, mournful ache, the kind you feel for something that is truly and irrevocably gone. I allowed myself to feel it. I cried, but my tears weren't for him to come back. They were for me, so I could move on. On the third night, I was curled up on the couch, reading a book, when my phone rang. The screen lit up with his name. I stared at it for a moment, my heart giving a single, hard thump. My first instinct was to ignore it, to follow my lawyer's advice to the letter. But something made me answer. I needed to hear it. I needed to close the circle. I swiped to answer and held the phone to my ear, saying nothing. "Grace." His voice was unrecognizable. The anger, the arrogance, the righteous indignation, it was all gone. All that was left was a raw, scraping desperation. It was the voice of a man who had fallen from a great height and had finally hit the ground. "Grace, please," he stammered, his voice thick and wet. He was crying. The sound was so pathetic, so alien that I felt a shiver of distaste. "Please talk to me." I remained silent, letting him fill the void. "I made a mistake, Grace," he choked out, the words tumbling over each other in a rush. "A terrible, horrible, stupid mistake. I was an idiot. I was a complete and utter fool. I don't know what I was thinking." He took a ragged breath. "This isn't me. Sleeping on Mark's couch, my card doesn't work, I have nothing. This was all just a moment of madness. It didn't mean anything. That girl, she meant nothing. It was just a stupid fantasy. The only thing that's real is you and our life." The man who, 3 days ago, had called our life a prison was now calling it the only real thing he had. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. "Please, can I just come home?" he begged, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I'm so sorry. I love you, Grace. I've never stopped loving you. We can fix this. I know we can. Just let me come home and we can talk. Properly, please." He finally fell silent, his ragged sobs echoing down the line. He had laid all his cards on the table. They were a miserable hand, regret, desperation, and a pathetic appeal to a history he himself had tried to burn to the ground. He had finished his plea, and now he was waiting, with bated breath, for my response. He was waiting for me to save him from the consequences of his own choices. I listened to his entire, desperate monologue without saying a word. I let his sobs and apologies hang in the air between us, thin and meaningless. The cold, clear resolve that had settled over me 3 nights ago was still there, no longer a temporary shield but a permanent part of my internal structure. The woman who might have been swayed by those tears, the woman who would have mistaken his desperation for genuine remorse, was gone. He had burned her away with his betrayal. When he finally finished, the silence on the line was absolute. He was waiting. Waiting for the forgiveness, the absolution, the key to the front door that he believed was his right. This was it, the final scene. But this time, I was the one who had written the script. This was my reply. "Leo," I began, my voice as calm and steady as it had been when he left. "You're right about one thing, you did make a mistake." A small, hopeful sound, like a choked sob of relief, came from his end of the line. He thought this was the beginning of a reconciliation. He was wrong. "But your mistake wasn't just walking out that door," I continued, my words measured and precise. "Your mistake wasn't just some moment of madness. Your mistake was thinking that I would be your safety net. Your mistake was believing that after you were done exploring your fantasy, you could just come back and I'd be here, waiting to clean up your mess." I paused, letting the words sink in. When you walked out that door, you weren't confused. You were making a choice. You chose to end our marriage in the cruelest way you could think of. You chose to betray 10 years of my life, of our life together. And you did it with a smirk on your face, fully expecting me to break. You wanted to see me fall apart, Leo. That's what you needed to feel powerful. I could hear his breathing, hitched and panicked now. "Grace, no, that's not." "But I didn't break," I said, cutting him off, my voice gaining strength. "You thought my stability was a weakness, something boring you needed to escape. But it's my strength. While you were crashing and burning on your friend's couch, I was making a new plan, a new blueprint." "I.H. Ave a lawyer, Leo," I said, the words as solid as steel. "The papers are being drawn up. You didn't just have a bad weekend. You detonated our life. And I'm not going to stand here in the rubble and help you try to glue the pieces back together. I'm going to build something new on my own." I took a final, deep breath. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I'm choosing to respect myself more than I miss the man I thought you were. I'm choosing to be more than someone's backup plan. "So no," I said, delivering the final, quiet blow. "You can't come home. This is my home now. Don't contact me again. Your belongings can be retrieved from the house at a time and date coordinated by our lawyers. Goodbye, Leo." I pressed the red icon on my screen before he could utter another word. Then, I opened his contact, scrolled to the bottom, and pressed "Block this caller." A profound, shuddering wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it made me dizzy. It was the feeling of a massive weight being lifted from my shoulders. The final tie was cut. The last word had been said. It was truly, finally over. I looked around my quiet living room, at the life I had built and was now rebuilding. It was my space, my future, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely, utterly, and gloriously free. The architect was ready to start her next project, herself. So, people of YouTube, what do you do when someone shows you they are willing to watch you break just to make themselves feel alive? You don't just prove them wrong by surviving. You prove them wrong by thriving. You take their dramatic exit not as an ending, but as a long overdue invitation to change the locks, change the script, and become the sole architect of your own happiness. You don't become a chapter in their story. You start a whole new book of your own. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human, navigating the complex map of relationships and emotions. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with someone who might appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.